Good afternoon. My name is Seema. On behalf of Oxford University Press Pakistan, I would like to welcome you all to the webinar week. The title of today's webinar is Developing a Love of Reading in the Early Years. Before we commence with the session, I have a few announcements to make. There will be a 6-second delay in the transmission to all participants as we go through this live session. The chat box is open for questions and comments throughout the webinar, and question and answers will be addressed in the last 20 minutes of the webinar. E-certificates will be provided for attendance, so please look out for the link in the chat box towards the end and fill in your details to receive the certificate in your inbox. If you don't click on the link and fill in the details, you will not receive the e-certificate. Let us now proceed with the session. The session will be facilitated by Arwa Khuzaima. Arwa Khuzaima has specialized at early childhood education from the Kindergarten Headmistress Association in England. She has over 27 years of experience in teaching ECE classes both in Pakistan and abroad. She has worked on training projects with various governments both internationally and nationally. She is a senior associate trainer at the Teachers Development Centre and also has trained teachers on the British Council interface on their Connecting Classrooms project. Arwa has helped teachers to adapt to ECE series and ESL series of books on the OUP platform, incorporating the 21st century skills into teaching and learning in her area of expertise. She is an associate trainer with many leading training institutes and has trained over 5,000 teachers. Over to you, Arwa.
Thank you, Seema. Good afternoon, friends. Today we're going to be looking at developing a love for reading. What an apt thing to do when in times like these. It's very easy to say reading gives us a place to go when we have to stay where we are. So let us look at what reading is all about. The first thing that I would like you to do in 60 seconds, I would like you to create as many words as you can from the word read. Use the letters of the word read and create as many words as you can. Your time starts now. 60 seconds. 30 seconds. 10 seconds. And time's up. I hope you enjoyed making those words. We're going to use those words at one time in the workshop later on. But for now, let us look at the word reading. What is reading? When I looked up the word reading and I looked up wordles, this is something that I came across and I loved it. It's the words that we can see a character, book, story, characters, read, novel, good. What I would like you to notice here is there is nothing that says phonemes, graphemes, nothing that says encoding, decoding. So that makes us wonder, but we will see what we mean by this. Reading is a multifaceted process involving 4 facets: word recognition, comprehension, fluency, and motivation. Now, what I would like you all to do is quickly create a short statement that explains what reading is. You could use the 4 words that we've talked about earlier. And let us look at what we've got. So, reading is the motivated and fluent coordination of word recognition and comprehension. Still no putting together letters, and that's nothing to do with reading. So let us go ahead. So reading is quite an achievement for a 6-year-old, isn't it? When I was looking up, when I was preparing this workshop and I was working on it, I came across 2 very important researches that I would like to state here about reading for pleasure. How do you make someone read for pleasure? You need to like something to read for pleasure. So let us look at the first research. It is by Kate Crumbold and Christina Clark. Consider the nature of what happens when we read a book. It's like a conversation. It's a back and forthness about it. The book proposes, the reader questions, the book responds, the reader considers, and we are active about the process. We can skim or scan, or we can read it slowly. We can read every word, or we can skip a longer passage. We can read it in the order it presents itself, or we can read it in any other order we please. We can look at the last page first, or decide to wait for it. We can put the book down. We can assent, or we can disagree. This is a very rich thing that the book presents to a child. The child sheds his inhibition when he holds up a book. He can look at it from wherever he wants to. There is no pattern that he needs to follow at present when we're talking about getting people to read for pleasure. So this is what it is all about, and that is what makes reading for pleasure interesting, because it is left to the reader's choice. To develop and maintain motivation to read, children need to appreciate the pleasures of reading. You would only be able to appreciate the pleasures of reading when you see people around you enjoying reading. Let us look at times today. How many children in times today see people enjoying reading? Hardly any, unfortunately. View reading as a social act to be shared. Get together with family to read. Get together your children in classroom to read. So that is what we mean by social act. See reading as an opportunity to explore and discover their own interests. When they read something, they realize that I don't like this book, I would rather read something else. So they learn to realize what their priorities are, what their interests are. Be exposed to a variety of different genres. When we're talking about preschool, most people refer to fairy tales as books that are in a preschool classroom. But that isn't true. We must have lots of different genres for children to explore. Mark Seidenberg, in his book Language at the Speed of Sight, he refers to the entire process of reading as statistical learning. And let us see what he says. He says, explicit instructions and conscious efforts are the tip of the iceberg. Statistical learning is the mass below the surface. So what we talk about as decoding and encoding and learning to read, blending letters together and reading, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And let us look at what lies below the iceberg and what is this statistical learning that he's talking about. He says statistical learning is all about words, lots and lots of words. It's about understanding. So if we're talking about understanding in the early years, vocabulary would have to be complemented with body language, and then beautiful language that children like to listen to. Knowledge of the world. How much do they know of the world? What we often regard as previous knowledge, that is what knowledge of the world would be. Big ideas. However little children are, they have big ideas looming in their head, and this is what we're talking about. Great stories and poems. An emotional bang, something that catches me emotionally as a child. This is what my Mark Siedenberg refers to as statistical learning. And old favorites are a great thing that children love. But so very often we find children wanting to hear the same story. My son, who's very old now, when he was a little child, every single night he would love for me to read to him Dear Zoo. And I often wondered what sense it made, but that's the way it is. Old favorites are old favorites. Another research that I thought I came across was from Holden. And he says, the path of a reader is not a runaway, but more a hack through a forest with individual twists and turns, entanglements and moments of surprise. Isn't that a wonderful way of putting reading as? And let us look at how that fits in. How do we develop an interest in learning to read? First of all, the concept of print. Talk to children when you're traveling, when you're walking around, when you're looking at jars, labels of jars, so that children are familiar with the concept of print. Language and listening skills. Let them listen to language well and enjoy language. Children enjoy being read to. They frequently ask you to read aloud. And why shouldn't you do it for them? They pretend to read. Very little children who don't even know how to read. They love holding up a book and act like they're reading. But that's the whole thing. Let them do it. Phonological and phonemic awareness. That finally comes there in the list. They can count words. They can look at the print, count words individually and see how many words on a page. They can count syllables in words. They can rhyme. They can identify the first sound of a word and the last sound of a word. And that's what we mean by developing interest in learning to read. All these things don't just happen. They would need to be supported through things that you do in the house or in school. So all the things that you would do, you would need to make sure they're developmentally appropriate practices. If you give a very little child a newspaper, I wouldn't consider that developmentally appropriate. Let the intelligences develop and grow. So use all his senses, engage all his senses to teach him to read. Stir the child's imagination. The way the teacher reads to to the children, actually stirs the child's imagination. Accommodate all modalities of learning. If you're telling a story, make sure your voice is loud, make sure you're audible, make sure you've got pictures to support, and if you can support it with actions that they can do, there's nothing like that. Let's just look at some of the activities that you could do to support reading and developing a love to read. Have patron readers. We will look at what patron readers are. Reading aloud. We shall look at that in a little while. Matching pictures. You could have pictures of a story and they could put them into sequence. The next one is pictures. You could tell the children a story and say, fine, draw a picture that you like best out of the story, and the child is allowed to draw whatever he wants out of the story. How and why questions. These should happen all the time while you're telling a story and while you're reading aloud, so that you know that the children are with you. Sight word recognition. This is done through many techniques and we will look at them in a little while. Sentence building. Cut words up, let them put them together to form sentences. Find the difference pictures. That's an interesting one. We will look at it in a little while. Story orchestra. After you've told a story, what you could get the children to do is, especially during circle time, you could start one sentence of the story, the child sitting next does the next sentence until they complete the story in a circle. Hopscotch. Outdoor play is something that children love, so use it to your advantage. Get them to do hopscotch on words, and we will look at that in a little while. What am I? Let them guess what the book is about. And then dear time. We will look at this in great detail. When we did the words that we got from the word read, I hope you all got this one, dear, because it has the same letters and it fits so well with reading. The fishing game. This is another activity that helps develop the children's finer motor skills, hand and eye coordination, and it's lots and lots of fun. The mystery bag. Mysteries are something that children love. Imagine taking a word out of a bag and flashing it to a child. Probably he's going to forget what you said, but he's going to remember that action. And because he remembers that action, he's always going to remember that word. Let's start with read aloud. I'm going to share a story with you here. I don't know whether I'll be able to do the entire story, but let's just begin. Winnie and Wilburs stay at home. This is a lovely story that Oxford University Press has recently published, and it describes the scenario so well and so beautifully. After you've done the cover page, you come to the blurb at the back. When we're showing the children a storybook, if it does have a blurb at the back, make sure you draw attention to that, because that allows the children to decide whether he likes the story. Is he going to enjoy the story? Does he even want to read it? Or would he rather put that down and pick another one up? So you read the blurb at the back, and then when you're ready and you feel yes, you want to read the book, you open the book. There are times that people will feel, I don't need to read this page, but yes, you must. That's the title page in the book. And then this book is really special because it says 5 reasons why we think you're going to love this book. And the 5 reasons are listed there. The reasons are: have fun at home, like Winnie and Wilbur. Print off the story. Have fun coloring in the background. Help Winnie and Wilbur cook up a magical feast. Look out for a very special rainbow. Let us now begin. But even before we begin, when you've told the children that this is something that they need to look forward to, that in itself is motivation for the child. So let us begin the story. Winnie the Witch and her big black cat Wilbur loved to fly about on her broomstick and look down at the crowds of people on the streets below. But now the streets were empty, and Winnie and Wilbur had to stay at home. The scientist on the TV said, stay at home to keep everyone safe. Here are some things that you must all do to stay safe. Blithering broomsticks, cried Winnie. It will be hard staying at home all the time. Keep washing your hands. Don't touch your face, said the scientist. Wilbur liked to lick his paws and wash his face. So Winnie made Wilbur a special collar. Wilbur didn't want to wear it. He wiggled his tail angrily, which tickled Winnie on her nose. And what do you think is going to happen because of that tickling? Can you take a guess? This is a question that you would ask the children. Tissue! Be sure to catch your sneeze in a tissue, then throw it away, continued the scientist's voice. Winnie washed her hands with lots of lovely bubbly soap and sang a song while she washed. Rub-a-dub, plinkety-plink, I'm washing my hands in the sink, she sang loudly. Wilbur washed his paws too and popped the bubbles as they floated past. Come on, Wilbur, let's do something fun, said Winnie. And Wilbur pointed at the computer. I know, said Winnie. We can get fit. What do you think they did? So you could stop and ask children questions like that. Winnie and Wilbur tried out an online exercise class. And now, get your hula hoops, said the instructor. 1, 2, 3. Watch out, Wilbur, cried Winnie, as their legs tangled together. Let's make some yummy pumpkin lunch now, Winnie said. So they went into the garden and Winnie picked up the biggest pumpkin she could find. She waved her magical wand, counted to 3 and shouted, Abracadabra! And what do you think she made out of the pumpkin? So you could elicit that from students. And there on the kitchen table was pumpkin soup, pumpkin pie, and pumpkin cake. Delicious, said Winnie. Now eat up, Wilbur. After lunch, Winnie got her books out. Come on, Wilbur. We need to keep on learning, she said. I can help you with your spelling. But Winnie wasn't very good at spellings, and Wilbur had to help her out. Meow, said Wilbur. Yes, good idea. Wilbur, let's paint a picture of a rainbow and put it in our windows. But Winnie only had black paint, so she waved her magic wand. And can you see all the beautiful colors that came out of the magic wand? Yes. Can we count the colors of the rainbow? So the teacher could count the colors of the rainbow as she moves on. Suddenly, there was lots of colors everywhere. And Wilbur looked like a rainbow too. What a fun day, Wilbur. Staying at home is not so bad after all. Especially when we've got each other, said Winnie. We've just got time for a story, and then let's go to sleep. Brrr, said Wilbur, settling down to listen to his favorite book. And that is the end of the story. I love this book. I loved it for a lot of reasons, very obvious reasons. It's talking about exactly what every child is going through. So when I read the book, when I hear the book as a child, I realize I'm not the only one locked home. My teacher's locked at home. Everybody is doing things at home. And everybody is washing their children will not remember to wash their hands because mommy asked them to wash their hands or their teacher asked them to wash their hands. But because they heard Winnie say that they must wash their hands, they'll do it. They'll do anything for Winnie. So this is something that we term as incidental learning. It's a storybook. Children enjoy it. We're not even going to stop and start preaching about it, but the story itself has played its part in the child's learning. What you would do intentionally, what you would teach intentionally is called intentional learning. But the impact of incidental learning is lifelong. I love this quote, and so I share it with you. If culture is a language, stories are its alphabets. So A, B, K, D is not the alphabets of a culture. It's stories, and that's how children read and children learn. Having a patron reader in class. A patron reader could be anybody. It could be an author, it could be a parent, it could be anybody from within the school, it could be another teacher. And it makes so much of a difference. Imagine if a child had his mommy coming to school to read to everybody. That sense of pride is something that we need to give children. When the child's mother reads to the entire class, children love reading, and because of that, they want to read, and because of that, they develop the pleasure of reading, the love of reading. Reading is all about contact, interaction, and participation. When the child's mother or whoever your patron reader is reads the story to the children, there is contact, close contact, because the teacher sits down, or whoever the reader is. If you look at the picture there, she sits down on a low chair. The children are sitting all around her. She's holding the book so that the children can see the book, and there is no inhibition. Everybody is sitting exactly how they would like to sit. And then there is interaction. Once the story begins and you start getting them to take part in the story by saying words or asking questions, so there is interaction. As when the story falls onto the child's ears and he listens to the story, there is an interaction between the child, the reader, and the story. And then when the child is able to retell the story himself, that's his participation in reading. And I love this braid. Because it says that reading is like a braid. Everything has to go together. When you braid hair up or you braid a rope up, you can't have one rope going separate and the other one going in another direction. They're all twisted together. So when we talk about reading, for all those people who feel that before we read, we must learn the alphabets, we must have enough oral language, we must know how to write. No, there's nothing like that. Everything goes hand in hand, and we will see how it does. Picture differences is a great idea for reading readiness. Why do you think pictures help in reading? Because to understand this, we're going to do a small activity here. I would like you to look at these words. Just as you've guessed, they're all in the Mandarin language, and the translation is given there at the bottom as love, peace, hope. I'm going to give you a minute to look at them, and then we're going to do something. You're only allowed to look at them. You're not allowed to take a snapshot of this, right? Examine them as well as you could. Okay, are you ready? Now identify these Chinese words that we just saw in the last slide. You don't need to write them, you just need to identify which is the English word that corresponds with this word that you will see flashed in Chinese. Okay, what do you think this is? You can type in the chat box the answers that you think they are. Yes, it is faith. What do you think this is? Joy. Amazing. And this one, for all of you who say it's life, yes, you're absolutely on point. This one is friend. And this one, what do you think it is? Dream. And the next one is family. I hope you got them all right. In that case, have we all suddenly learned Mandarin within less than 3 minutes? That isn't possible. I'll just share how I identified faith. I looked at the stick on top, one lying diagonally and one lying horizontally, and I said, okay, this looks like an F. I didn't bother about the rest, and I said, okay, this is faith. I looked at life and I said, that looks like a house. That's where everybody lives. So then I said, that's life. Joy. This was pretty funny. Whenever I looked at this, I said, I remembered just one scene from the Titanic when Kate Winslet stands on the boat right on top with her arms outstretched. And I feel, oh, what joy, feeling the breeze gushing straight into your face. And I said, okay, this has to be joy. Everybody must have perceived the words in a very different manner. So this is why picture reading is extremely important, and picture differences is extremely important for learning how to read. Let us look at the 4 developmental stages of word analysis. The first one is logographic. What do we mean by logo? Logo means picture, and that is exactly a stage that we saw just now. The next one is beginning alphabetic. It's not about the first letter or the last letter, but just when the child is exposed to a print-rich environment and he sees lots and lots of print, he begins to understand that everything that is said is a word and has a form. The third one is the alphabetic stage. Yes, here is when the child learns that this letter is K and this letter is A and this one is T. So this is a stage, the third stage. Very unfortunately, this is a stage that a lot of us begin with. And the last one is the orthographic stage, where the child not only recognizes the K and the A and the T, he puts it together to form a word, and later on he's able to put words together to form a sentence. So these are the 4 stages of word analysis. When we talked about logo, the logo of a book is its cover page. So whenever you read to children, you must introduce the cover page. Very often the teacher just flashes it and says, okay, the book that we're going to be looking at is at school. No, that's not how you do it. You actually introduce the cover page. You talk about the title of the book. When you talk about the title, make sure you sweep your finger over the words that you read. You read at school, sweep your finger over it, at school. This gives the child a sense of where the text begins from and where it ends. Otherwise, it's just a picture to the child. And then start by talking about the picture, talking about the cover page. Who can you see in the picture? Because it's a very familiar feature that the children are familiar with. Start with, who can you see? Oh, that's Kipper. And is he happy? Is he sad? You could talk about emotions, talk about all the nouns that you can see. What things can you see in the picture? There's a plant, there's lots of plants in fact. There's a boat, it's in the water. What's Skipper wearing? He's wearing a t-shirt with sleeves, and he's got his sleeves rolled up, and he's got stripes on his t-shirt. And you could talk about where are the plants, and you can talk about, a lot of people say the plants are on the window. Actually, here is a great time to teach children language. So you would say, yes, the plants are on the windowsill. So you would teach all this language that you would want to teach. After you do the cover page, then you would go into the book, and just like you described the cover page, you would describe every detail of what they see in the picture. Children love to count. Even before, I find it quite amazing that even before children come to school, they've already learned to count. So then you can see, okay, how many little children can you see in the class? And they could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. I see most children might stop at 6, and then you can say, I can see another child at the right at the back. He's got a ball in his hand. And then you can talk, who do you think this lady is? And talk about every single detail. You could talk about colors. You could talk about time of the day, because the jelly beans that you can see in the picture are different colors. The time of the day would be something that you would talk about. What time of the day do you think it is? And in case someone says it's night, you can say, I can see the sun through the window, so it can't be night. And that is how you would be able to talk about the picture. When you're talking about the picture, you're giving children real world language, because children get to hear things like, okay, what is that little boy doing? He's ironing clothes. So you would make sure that you answer all the questions in complete language. A lot of times, very little children might respond in their mother tongue. That time, since we are teaching English, the teacher could translate it and say, yes, that he's ironing clothes, she's cooking, she's got a bow in her hair, and you can talk about the picture endlessly. You would probably spend up to 15 minutes talking about this picture. This is the first ORT book where there is, if you notice, there are no words, yet it is a very important part of the reading series. The next step that you would do is, if you have older children, this is a book that belongs to older children. Instead of just saying, okay children, I'm going to read and you're going to listen, even before you do that, yes, that is an important thing to do, but because now we're into the conscious effort of teaching children to read, we have developed a love to read. Now we're into the conscious process of teaching reading, learning, teaching children how to read. So what we would do is we would tell children, okay, I want you to look for names of children on this page, and you just elicit those orally, and then say what has been lost, and they can look for it, look for the word. Yes, it's the magic key. So who do they ask, and so you can talk about that page like that. And this is how you would tackle the pages later on. When we talk about sight reading is very important, because 75% of language cannot be decoded phonetically. It has to be done by sight. The word toys, for example, you can't teach it through phonetics. It has to be done as sight. When you introduce the word, if you notice, I've got it in 2 different fonts. We would assume this is a card and this is the teacher writing on the board. So the teacher would paste the card somewhere, and then she would write it somewhere, and then she would ask, what's this word? Toys. And then she would move on to the next word. Party. Okay, what's this word? Party. After she's done that, she would do a recap of those other words. What is this word? This is toys. Okay, and wanted, and so on and so forth. A teacher could easily introduce up to 4 to 5 words in a class. It would take about 15 minutes to do. After she's done with the words, that's not the end of the words. The teacher goes on to build a word wall. So the first set of words that she taught on day 1, she would put them up, and then as she keeps teaching day after day and month after month, all the sight words would come down on that wall until there is something like this. And obviously in a normal classroom there'd be many more words. And what the teacher would do is, I as a reading teacher recommend that these words must be read every day. Okay, if they're just 20, it's fine. Or they're 25, even then that's something you could tackle. But then by that time, I think children would be rote reading. So it really doesn't make sense. So if you notice, the words are done in different colors. So the teacher would say, okay children, I'd like you to read all the words on the yellow card. I'd like you to read all the words on the green card or the pink card, whatever. What happens, or she could say, read all the words that have an ah in it. Maybe she's taught the letter ah that week. So she says, read all the letters that have an ah there. So the children read all those words, and so on and so forth. What happens, whether the child consciously verbalizes all these words every day or not, he sweeps his eye over them and he's able to say them. So that is what we mean when we say read them every day. Another lovely game that children love to do, and it's lovely for teaching, is the fishing game, where the child has a rod and there's a magnetic pin, there's a pin on the fish and a U-clip on the fish, and there's a magnet at the end of the fishing rod, and they pick up a word and they have to say it out. Or maybe when you want to make it really challenging, the teacher can say a word and the child has to actually fish for it. So this not only helps reading, but it's also developing the child's finer motor skills and hand and eye coordination. The next one, who doesn't like to do hopscotch? So when they're doing hopscotch, when they land on a set of letters, they have to say a word that has that blend in it. So such a lot of fun. There's that one with the words, the letters. There's the other one with the words. You could do what you want, what you wish to in your class. Who doesn't like to play ball? We as adults love to play ball. So children love to play ball, and not to forget that it has its benefits. Children learn how hand and eye coordination, and when the child catches the ball, the teacher could say, okay, look at where your left hand thumb is and read the word that is closest to your left hand thumb. So then the child reads the word and then he throws the ball to another child. Isn't that lots and lots of fun? You could do sentence strips. Maybe you've done a story. We might forget stories, but children don't forget stories. Children love stories, so you could put those sentences onto strips and get children to organize them. Dear time. This is something that I love talking about. Dear time is about drop everything and read time. What this does is supplements regular reading by encouraging independent reading. It is an important time in the daily class schedule. If you can speak to parents and ask them to have their time at home, there's nothing like that. Their time is dear because whatever they're doing, be it math, be it English, whatever they're doing, they literally drop everything as soon as they hear the dear time bell. I used to have a special bell that I rang in my class when it was time for dear time, and every child would run to the class library, take his book up and start reading. It's not only the child who reads, the teacher pulls up a book to read as well. And she doesn't pull up any of her school books. She doesn't pull up any of the children's books. She brings her own book that she would like to read, and the teacher reads. Not only does the teacher read, everybody in the school reads, whether it is the watchman, whether it is the ayah, whoever it is, everybody in school reads. And everybody just grabs a book. So this exposes students to a variety of genres. And it's lots and lots of fun. It helps children understand that books like ice cream come in lots of flavors, and there's something for everyone to enjoy. And when they're doing their time, the teacher will not interrupt. The teacher will not ask questions. The teacher will not point out that the child is reading back first or front first. The teacher will not even ask the child to turn the book if it is upside down. There is going to be no kind of interruption from the teachers. Reading, like anything else, everything needs to be celebrated. So when the child reads a book, the teacher or the parents could put up a wall, and they could put up something like that. This is a simple wall made out of paper plates and paint, and they could put up a picture from the story they read. Instead of just putting up a title, it would be nice to put a picture of what they liked out of that book, and you could have a wall like that. And this would be great celebration, because for the child it is so important that you've displayed it there for everyone to look at. You could have a reading garden similarly, and that is how you would teach how to read. A lot of parents, a lot of elders, a lot of adults say, how do we find time to read? But it's so simple. If you read 30 minutes every day, that means you will read 1 book in a week, 4 books a month, 40 books a year, and 2,000 or more in a reading lifetime. Isn't that easy? And this is something that I would like every one of us to go back with today. I will read on a boat. I will read with a goat. I will read on a train. I will read in the rain. I will read with a fox. I will read in a box. I will read with a mouse. I will read in a house. I will read here and there. I will read anywhere. So, thank you very much. Enjoy your reading time.
Thank you, Arwa. Thank you very much for sharing so many strategies to promote reading. Shall we begin with the question and answer session?
Sure.
All right, before we begin, I just want to announce that there is a link which is pasted in the chat box for you to mark your attendance. If you don't complete that link and if you don't submit your details, you will not receive your certificate. We can just see 302 hits on it. However, we know that there are 1,500 participants listening to this webinar. So please complete your attendance in order to receive the certificate. All right, Arwa, the first question is, how do we develop a love of reading in this era in which there are so many social apps and most of the people's time is engaged in doing something online, either on a phone or a tablet or the computer?
Okay, thank you. That's a lovely question. In these times, when people want to be on an app, on a laptop or on a phone, well, who said reading stopped just in books? Yeah, there's nothing like holding a book, but you could read from a book. Like the story that I just read to you is something that I found on Oxford Owl online. So, and they're all free, and it's very easy to grab something online and read that to your child. If children see you enjoying reading something, they're going to enjoy reading too.
Thank you, Arwa. Next question is, how do we check the reading of students during online classes? So maybe this person is talking about the assessment of reading, whether they're doing it right, whether the pronunciations are right. So how do we monitor reading?
Okay, great. If you remember, I flashed the sight word wall. This sight word wall is something that I created on PowerPoint. A teacher could do a similar thing. She could introduce 4 words, and just like you would have children chanting out sight words in your class, you could do sight words in an online class. In an online class, you could make it even more challenging. You can say, okay, everybody whose name begins with A, read all the words that have an A in it. So you could use different strategies to do it. And that's the way you would be able to do a lot of assessment.
All right. Our next question is, what author or series would you recommend for a year 2 child, someone who's 4 years old?
Okay. I personally, I have taught the ORT for a lot of years. Being a mother of 2 children, I've used it with my children also, and they've thoroughly enjoyed those books, and they're very easily available. I think you should grab them. They're very short, very easy to follow, and what I love best about the ORT book is the last page of the ORT book has an element of surprise. So children love to go back with a surprise. So I love those books. Try them out.
All right. The next question is, are there levels of reading, and what is the level at which fluency in reading should come?
Yes, there are levels of reading. The way fluency comes depends upon the exposure that the child gets to books, and how often is he read to, and how often does he actually spend time with a book. So it will vary from child to child.
All right. How can we identify best sources of reading books for online classes?
When we're talking about reading for pleasure, developing a love for reading, for online classes, like I mentioned earlier, the Oxford Owl is available at present. A lot of their books are available online for free. You could register as a parent, as a student, as a teacher, and give the child a choice. He can pick up a book. You can help him select a book. Maybe he doesn't like it. You can easily put that down and choose another one.
All right. This question is very popular, Arwa. And the question is, how do we develop reading amongst children with parents who are uneducated and cannot play a role in developing reading as a habit at home?
Lovely. See, everybody doesn't know how to read, but it doesn't matter. When you do dear time, like I said, if the child is holding the book upside down, it doesn't matter. The parent, whether he reads English or Urdu or whatever language it is, it doesn't matter. What the child needs to see is a book in the parent's hands and the parents enjoying it. When the child sees people in his environment enjoying something, they automatically develop a love for it.
All right, Arwa. Next question is, are bedtime stories helpful in developing a love of reading in the early years?
Absolutely. Any kind of story time leads towards a leads towards a love for reading. But if you're doing a bedtime story and your objective is that the child must develop a love for reading, then in that case, hold the book with the child when you read. I as a parent and I as a child had it both ways. Sometimes I would hold a book up to read, and sometimes I would just tell a story like that without a book. So, but if your objective is to develop a love for reading, then yes, hold a book up whenever you're reading, whether it is bedtime or whatever time.
All right, Arwa, the next question is, there is always a show of different response each time a child is introduced to the same book.
Okay.
What could be the reason of this change in response every time the same book is opened?
Okay. Number one, the most important thing that might be is that the child doesn't like that kind of a story, and it's absolutely okay not to like it. So give the child a choice. That's one of the biggest factors. The other factor is his surrounding, his atmosphere, his mood. Every child, every adult has their own moods. So that's just not his day, and he doesn't want to respond in the same way that he responded to it yesterday. So that's perfectly okay. If we can have mood swings, why can't children have them too?
All right, Arwa. The next question is, how can we overcome the problem of comprehension when students are looking at stories in which there are pictures which do not relate to their context?
In that case, firstly, I don't see how you would have a storybook that has pictures that do not relate to what the text is saying. In that case, it's not a...
Arwa, I think they're saying the question is that what if the child does not relate to that context? For example, a child in Karachi is reading a story in which they're showing snow. So
Okay.
that is not something that a child in Karachi would see. So how do we go about those stories?
Lovely. When we started the workshop, I said reading allows us to go to places where we can't go to. So if the teacher or the parent has a book about snow and she would like to still do it with them, then talk about snow. You could show children, since we are all so gadget friendly, we could show children pictures of what it is like to be in snow, show them a small YouTube video and they can see children on snow, wearing snow clothes, and then we would probably take it from there.
All right. Arwa, the next question is that what to do with children who are not showing interest in reading? How do we motivate them, and how do we provide incentives for such children?
Okay. The only way I believe that you can create a reading culture, develop a love for reading, is by reading yourself. As a teacher, you're an idol for the child. So if you're reading and you're enjoying something, when you're reading something, make sure your facial expression tells of what you're reading, whether you're reading it aloud or not, but he sees that you're enjoying every single word of that book, then he is going to love reading. That's the only way I can see we can motivate children. If you're talking about incentives, putting up a wall where you're putting up those paper plates with whatever picture they like from each book, that's motivation enough, because you're celebrating my work as a child. Other incentives could be maybe they get one more book, a new book to read every month. Maybe they could, as an incentive, if they've been very good at something, you could buy them a new book. So that is how I see it.
All right, Arwa, we'll take this as the last question. How important is the role of props while storytelling?
Props are extremely important because, like I said, that we must support all three modalities. The auditory skill, auditory part is supported with your voice. You have to have something visual in your hands. So it could be props and it could be books. So you must make sure that you have props, or even a book is a prop for that matter. You must have something in your hands when you're teaching anything.
All right, Arwa, thank you so much for this presentation in which you have shared a lot of strategies. I hope all the participants learned a lot and would be able to implement all these strategies while promoting reading to young learners. I just wanted to make a few announcements before we end it. I hope you've all marked your attendance on the link that is given. If you wish to register in our webinars that are on Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday, you can still register now. If you wish to look at our bite-sized learning, and if you wish to look at our webinars and our recorded webinars, there is a link that is also given in the chat box. Thank you so much for joining us. If you wish to reach out to us, all you need to do is write an email to pd.pk@oup.com. Thank you, Arwa, and thank you, everyone.